Hi, and welcome to the Bruce Channel. I'm Bruce, and yeah, a little scruffy, but more on that later. It has been quite a week. We should probably begin by saying Happy Easter to those of you who practice Western Christianity. If you do, then today is the terminus of Holy Week. There's a bit of unusual irony here, but vis-a-vis the secular calendar and the Christian calendar, or actually the Christian calendars, plural. Almost 1800 years ago, the First Ecumenical Council set the rule for when to have Easter. The first Sunday after the first full moon, after the vernal equinox, which was a week ago. But really, instead of the actual equinox being the equinox day, they pretty much just settled on March 21st, which is often enough when it is. So we had our full moon midweek. This is the first Sunday after that. By the way, quick sidebar. It could happen that the first full moon is a Sunday, and if that happens, it's delayed a week. All right, so that was the rule set almost 1800 years ago. Things went along swimmingly for over 700 years until in 1054 the Eastern Church broke with the Roman Church and became the Eastern Orthodox Church. Now, fast forward another 500 years or so. See, the Julian calendar that had been in use was flawed. It lasted roughly 2 weeks longer than the astronomical year. Absent a correction, we ultimately might have been shoveling snow instead of having picnics on the 4th of July. So Pope Gregory introduced the cleverly named Gregorian calendar. All right, the Eastern Orthodox Church follows the old calendar. So their Easter won't be until next month. And there's two reasons that happens. The other is that the Orthodox Church wants to follow the chronology of the Bible. That is, the Last Supper, of course, famously depicted in Da Vinci's masterpiece. The Last Supper was the celebration of Passover. Of course, the crucifixion came after the Passover. For the Western Christian Church this year, that's not so, but the Hebrew calendar is completely different from all the calendars. And this year, Passover isn't for another month. So the Eastern Church will have its Easter sometime later after that. Oh, here's another quirky thing. Some years, the full moon is weeks and weeks after March 21st on both the calendars, Julian and Gregorian. Now, it's not infrequent. 2010, 2011, 2014, it's going to happen again next year. But then it won't happen for another 17 years. Interesting stuff. One last liturgical calendar coincidence. The Annunciation is always celebrated on March 25th. The Annunciation, of course, is when the angel is said to have appeared to the Virgin Mary and told her she would conceive, virginity notwithstanding. It's March 25th because that's exactly 9 months prior to December 25th when Western Christianity celebrates Christmas. But the irony is that March 25th, the day celebrated as the day of his conception, was this year the day of his crucifixion, Western Christianity's Good Friday. All right, those of us in North America again awoke one morning this week to the news that there had been another terrorist attack in Europe, this time at the airport and in subways in Brussels, Belgium. At my deadline, there were 34 known dead. And in the days after the bombing, there have been 6 arrests and more forthcoming. Now, late last week, the mastermind of last fall's Paris attacks was captured. And the story is he'd been spilling the beans, so to speak. So speculation is that the terrorists felt their apprehension was imminent and they thus accelerated their attack. ISIS took responsibility. And of course, worldwide, the responses were predictable. Hearts and prayers go out. We'll extend any help we can. And predictably, too, in this country, some of the candidates tried to use it for political advantage. Donald Trump said, "I told you so." Ted Cruz wants to patrol Muslim neighborhoods. And former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani called Hillary Clinton a founding member of ISIS. Okay, I know it's to the Republicans running for office advantage to depict Democrats in the worst possible way. That's what they do. But they try to make it seem the president isn't doing anything. Now, really, can any fair-minded person really believe that? It isn't as easy, never has been, never can be, as Donald Trump or Ted Cruz would like to say it is. They speak in terms of using overpowering force, but against whom exactly? Trump has said he'd have no problem killing family members of ISIS. But that is specifically a war crime. The president just gave orders to send more ground troops to the area, but taking out ISIS is not as simple as saying take out ISIS. Notwithstanding it's not being simple as giving a direct order, ISIS is losing. They're losing territory, they're losing leaders, roughly one every 3 days. We intercept their communications, we know what they're saying. The remaining leaders are exhorting their followers to go fight, but they're not fighting so much, they're running back, which is why there are terrorist attacks. Every time they provoke us into saying dumb things like patrol Muslim neighborhoods, it makes recruiting new fighters easier. True enough, though, the president didn't help his own cause. The day of the bombings, he was in Cuba, and I get it. He doesn't want to offer an invective to rile up possible jihadists. And in any setting, you don't want terrorists, any terrorists, anywhere, any cause, to think they have succeeded in making you alter your plans. But he was in Cuba that day. He went to a ball game and then flew on to Argentina. The ball game was a bad visual. Going to Argentina, that was good, staying with your plans. But then at the state dinner, he danced a tango. Well, I know, Argentina invented the tango. It's their national dance. And normally, it would have been humanizing, gratifying. But same day as the bombings, that certainly appeared insensitive. Oh, all right, so primary/caucus stuff this week. There were a few. Republican side, there were two. Ted took Utah, Donald took Arizona, but Trump gained more delegates. The Dems had 3 states in play. Bernie won 2 of them, but Hillary got more delegates. And Jeb Bush endorsed Ted Cruz, which probably broke the other Governor Kasich's heart. Former Speaker Newt Gingrich hasn't formally endorsed Donald Trump, but he's been talking him up. He's been praising him. Gotta wonder if he's maybe hoping for a cabinet position or maybe an ambassadorship. Regarding endorsements, a friend of mine recently made this observation. It is a very strange election when one man, in this case Donald Trump, has the endorsement of both former Grand Wizard of the KKK, David Duke, and retired neurosurgeon Ben Carson. It's a strange world after all. Oh, one good thing to mention, there's no primaries this week. You may recall a couple of shows ago I'd mentioned how Richard Nixon, this day in history, won the New Hampshire primary 1960 March 8th. And then in 1960, the next primary wouldn't be for another month. That was the Wisconsin primary on April 5th. Guess what? Some things don't change. Not this week, but next week, Wisconsin will have its primary on April 5th. There was a wee bit of good news out of Washington recently. The bill in the Senate that would have outlawed states or any other local agency from requiring GMO labeling failed to get enough votes for cloture. Now, that is not the same as saying it's dead, but it is good news. However, when Congress returns after their Easter break, the bill may be amended. It's not dead yet, so it wouldn't hurt to contact your senator to demand they vote it down. If you're not familiar with the issue, here's a real quick primer. Food companies can modify crops to be bigger or resist pests or resist glyphosate. That is the active ingredient in Roundup and other brands of weed killers. So instead of having to avoid spraying, say, the corn, the crop, they have corn that is resistant to glyphosate. So they just spray everything. It gets in the plant doesn't die, but it is in the plant and you eat it. The World Health Organization has called glyphosate a probable carcinogen. If you believe that it is not, you can eat foods that are or are made with GMOs, but Vermont and a few other states, but Vermont's law goes into effect first on July 1st. It mandates that if there are GMOs, the label has to disclose that. That's all it says. 90% of it consistently agree that we should have the labeling. 90% of the population but the bill in the Senate would make Vermont's law illegal. Is that not insanity? What is a more intrinsic right to have than the right to know what we're putting in our bodies or our children's bodies? By the way, if you want to knock off weeds and hate the thought of using Roundup, here's a little something said to work better. Put 2 cups of Epsom salts. Actually, I saw one recipe that just said table salt. 2 cups of salt, Epsom or otherwise, and a 1/4 cup of Dawn dish detergent. It specified the regular blue. I don't know why that would make a difference. Nevertheless, that's what it said. And mix them with a gallon of vinegar. And it's said to kill weeds quickly. All right, back to the bill in the Senate. Being set aside in the Senate is certainly good news. The other good news, ConAgra, Kellogg's, General Mills, Mars, they all announced that they will label GMOs. Campbell's had announced that earlier this year. But it isn't over yet, so keep the heat on the Senate. Watch for a sneak play. Big Chemical and Big Food has billions and billions and billions of dollars at stake. And your life or mine means nothing to them. As Professor Moody might say, constant vigilance.
Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. For most of my adult life, I weighed a little over 100 pounds. Not much more than in this picture taken when I was about 17 and considering becoming a jockey. But as is often true, once I crossed into my 40s, extra weight came and it stayed. For years I tried to lose, instead gained, and ended up 153 pounds. And I'm embarrassed to show you this video. Then I learned that it isn't about calories and exercise, but instead it's about what you eat. You might say, sure, ice cream makes you fat. But there were surprises, things like orange juice not being such a wise choice if you're trying to lose weight. So I just made some basic changes to what I ate, not how much, and the weight just fell off. Now, nearly 3 years later, it is still off. And don't misunderstand, I'm eating foods I like, not bamboo shoots. Friends ask me how I did it so often, I put it in a book. It's available as an ebook for all platforms, and the print edition is available at barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com. Hey, you can shrink too.
Well, welcome back. Remember, you can write to us at thebrucechannel@yahoo.com. You can watch all of our previous shows at tinyworld.com/brucechannel or at our Facebook page, The Bruce Channel. All right, I would like to direct your attention to something very cool. You may recall I was in a film called Tom's Missed Call last year, made it last year, and when I returned from South Carolina, I'd shown you some stills taken on the set, and some of the other actors, and the director, and the cinematographer, and I told you that the filmmakers had made the documentary film in their own words, The Tuskegee Airmen. That documentary film is being shown nationwide in select theaters all over the country this Tuesday night, March 29th. One night only. Check out the movie listings in your area. It's one night only, Tuesday night. And if you like, you can Google for some reviews. I know there's at least one review that occurred on March 21st at ncregister.com. Now, I have a copy, and even I may go out to see it. I hope that you will. So do you know what an amphicar is? An amphicar was a German car that launched at the 1961 New York Auto Show. They were made from 1961 to 65. They were still being sold somewhat as late as 67. And they are peculiar. Very peculiar, yes. There are those who collect them. This is a picture of an amphicar. It was taken in 2005 in Stuttgart, Germany, yes. If you Google amphicar and NPR, you'll find that NPR did a story on the amphicar back, I think, in 2005. The reporter was at an amphicar festival in Ohio. Okay. So, guess who had fun with his very own amphicar? Here he is. Do you recognize him? That is our 36th president, shown here with his vice president, Hubert Humphrey. They were utilizing a different kind of horsepower. So the story is, this is after his presidency, but he sometimes offered to show guests around his ranch. They'd get in the amphicar. He'd drive around the ranch. He'd show them this. He'd show them that. And then he would feign having the brakes fail. And he would plunge down a ramp into the lake. And they'd all, of course, be all spooked. And then he'd laugh a bit. And he'd take them for a drive around the lake. Really. All right, this past Wednesday was National Puppy Day. Seriously. I didn't know that until a friend posted, Happy National Puppy Day. Really? Which got me thinking about what other days are designated out there. Turns out today is not only Easter, it is Quirky Country Music Song Titles Day, which certainly stands as the poster boy from the sublime to the ridiculous. Same for Good Friday, which was also Tolkien Reading Day. All right, tomorrow? Well, tomorrow, whether you use Roundup or the homemade formula I showed you, don't apply it tomorrow. Tomorrow, Monday, March 28th, is Weed Appreciation Day. Weed Appreciation Day, which makes me wonder if Washington and or Colorado will have a Weed Appreciation Day festival. I think not. The picture accompanying the announcement was, I think, that of a dandelion. Anyway. Doctor's Day is Wednesday, so say hello to all of your doctor friends. Oh yeah, and it was Wednesday this past week that sent all of this into motion, this designated day curiosity. It was something else about last week's Wednesday that I thought was really strange, not designated day, but one of my students has this upcoming week off. It's his spring break, high school freshman. We talked about it a bit last week. When would he get off? When was he prepping? You know, was it beginning Easter, or did he have a day off or two in advance? So, turned out the schedule had called for a half day on Wednesday before Easter, then Thursday and Friday off, and all of this week. But we had a few snow days to make up. They made up one of them on President's Day. Had been scheduled off, but they had school. But then there was one more to make up. They put that in this week, this past week. That's not all so strange, but Mark Twain's observation about common sense remains relevant because my students still had Wednesday as the half day, the getaway day, but then returned for a whole day on Thursday. I kid you not. All right, last October I told you of the opportunity I'd had to attend a speaking event as part of the Bryan series, which is presented by Guilford College. Subscribers to the series typically get to hear an eclectic mix of 5 speakers in a season. Speakers from previous seasons have included President Bill Clinton, the actress Anna Deavere Smith, author and former broadcast anchorman Tom Brokaw, former Governor Jeb Bush, the creator of Doonesbury, the satirical cartoonist Gary Trudeau. So you get the idea. Well, when I went last fall, it was to hear journalist Robin Wright. Very, very informative. She's reported from, 100 countries all over the world, but she described the several socioeconomic reasons that she is optimistic that Iran wants to leave behind its pariah state status and rejoin the rest of the world. It was good to hear. Well, this past week, I got an invitation to go again, and the speaker was George Takei. You may know the name, but you may better know him as Mr. Sewell from the original Star Trek. And he spoke anecdotally, and it therefore wasn't quite as informing as Miss Wright's, but it was inspiring, especially given what he'd had to overcome. He was born in Los Angeles in 1937. 1937, just a few years later, Japan bombs Pearl Harbor, and people on the West Coast of Japanese ancestry were taken from their homes. Put another way, their homes were taken from them. And they were taken to internment camps all around the country. His family was sent to one in Arkansas. I have worked in Arkansas. It gets cold there. They lived in tents, and their facilities were latrines. These were American citizens, loyal American citizens. Many of them at the camps those who were old enough, had tried to enlist in the armed forces immediately after Pearl Harbor. They were turned away. So, once again, we grew up hearing wonderful stories. They fed us the stories in school, and there are many good ones that are true. But it's also true that we have many dark chapters in our history where truth, justice, and the American way are antithetic to liberty and justice for all. Ask the Cherokee. Ask the Africans who were separated from their families and their cultures and brought to North America as chattel, as slaves. And ask the Americans of Japanese ancestry who lived along the West Coast in the early 1940s. So the war ends, they're given $20 and a train ticket to anywhere. Their homes were forfeit. $20 was worth more then than now, but it still isn't a lot of money. Wouldn't last long. His parents elected to go back to LA. That was where their home had been, but with little money. And it was very tough for them to find jobs because they looked, Japanese. It was a pretty miserable existence. They lived in the absolute worst part of LA. Vomit and human excreta were aromas never gone. Mr. Takei said it was so bad that his baby sister, who was less than a year old when they went to the camp, thus she knew no other existence, cried and asked, "Why can't we go back home?" That the cold tent and barbed wire and latrines and armed guards were more appealing to her than being in LA. So, it was quite a night, and Mr. Takei's story is compelling. He went on to school at Berkeley to study architecture, then he switched to UCLA, and he got both his bachelor's degree and his master's degree in theater. Of course, he became helmsman Hikaru Sulu. It was quite a night. As it happens, because of a scheduling conflict, I'm going to be able to attend the last one of this year's series, in the Brian series, next month. And it too should be memorable. The speaker will be author Malcolm Gladwell. He wrote The Tipping Point, Outliers, and several other bestsellers. I've read his books, and if you haven't, I'd highly recommend them. I am looking forward to hearing him. Oh, also this past week, they announced next year's speakers. This is cool. They include nutrition expert and author Michael Pollan, Mark and Scott Kelly. The twins, they're both astronauts, and Scott is the one who just came back from almost a year in space. Oxford and NYU educated lawyer and human rights specialist Amal Clooney. Yeah, that Amal Clooney. Also Nobel Peace Laureate Brian Stevenson and actor, director, writer, science advocate Alan Alda. Pretty cool, huh? I don't know if I'll be able to attend any of those. I don't know if I'll be alive past Wednesday. But, it would be nice. And if I am alive past Wednesday, I'll be headed to South Carolina, where I have a role in the film Masters of Disasters. My character doesn't have a name. I'll be known only as the Mysterious Drifter, which is why we're a little scruffy this week. I'm not only scruffy, but a bit eerie and supernatural. I'm not going to tell you anything else about it, but that's my upcoming week, which may mean we miss doing a show next weekend. But for your upcoming week or weeks, I hope it is, or they are, the best week or weeks you've ever had.